Aloha, namaste, and welcome again to another Krishna book reading. My name is Janapati Das, and thank you so much for joining me. We're going to start with some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names, so please feel free to join along. Nam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Siddham Svarupananda Paramahamsa Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Siddham Svarupananda Paramahamsa Itinamine Chaitanya Gauranga Chaitanya. Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading, continuing the story of the lifting of Govardhana Hill. And as we remember from our last story, if this is your first time, you can go back to the beginning of my videos on YouTube and follow all the way from the first one up to now. But if you remember from last time, Lord Krishna had noticed that his father and the coward men and the people of Vrndavan were about to engage in a agricultural sacrifice, Vedic sacrifice for the demigod Lord Indra, who is the predominating deity or demigod, empowered living entity, to oversee the weather and the heavenly planets somewhat. He's considered to be the king of the heavenly planets. And because he is a very powerful living entity, just like powerful living entities in this material world, they become puffed up with their false pride and their power, as we see now of Vladimir Putin becoming puffed up in his position and wanting to go into Ukraine and conquer Ukraine. So, similarly, I mean, it's a little bit different. There are demons in the Krishna book that get puffed up with false pride, but there are demigods who also do that. And as Bhaktivedanta was stating in here, that Lord Indra is a devotee of Krishna, but because of his position, he sometimes forgets. As we've seen, some of these demigods forget their position, and Krishna decides to tell his father and the coward men that he should not give Indra this sacrifice, but actually give the sacrifice to Govardhana Hill and the Brahmanas and the cows, who are the providing factors of spiritual wealth. And in the case of Vrndavan, the cows provide milk and livelihood, and Govardhana Hill provides jewels, but even more so because it is the pastimes of Krishna. The cows are very dear to Krishna, that we should worship the cows. We should offer our respects to the cows. We should take very good care of the cows. And so he persuades them to have a sacrifice, and that's where we left off. The sacrifice known as Govardhana Pooja is observed in the Krishna consciousness movement. Lord Chaitanya has recommended that since Krishna is worshipable, so his land, Vrndavan, and Govardhana Hill are also worshipable. To confirm this statement, Lord Krishna said that Govardhana Pooja is as good as worship of him. From that day, the Govardhana Pooja has still been going on and is known as Annakuta. In all the temples of Vrndavan and outside of Vrndavan, huge quantities of foods are prepared in this ceremony and are very sumptuously distributed to the general population. Sometimes the food is thrown to the crowds and they enjoy collecting it off the ground. From these instances, we can understand that prasadam offered to Krishna never becomes polluted or contaminated, even if it is thrown on the ground. The people therefore collect it and eat it with great satisfaction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, therefore advised the coward men to stop the Indra Yajna and begin the Govardhana Pooja in order to chastise Indra, who was very puffed up at being the supreme controller of the heavenly planets. The honest and simple coward men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, accepted Krishna's proposal and executed in detail everything he advised. They performed Govardhana worship and circumambulation of the hill. Following the inauguration of Govardhana Pooja, people in Vrndavan still dressed nicely and assembled near Govardhana Hill to offer worship and circumambulate the hill, leading their cows all around. According to the instruction of Lord Krishna, Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men called in learned Brahmanas and began to worship Govardhana Hill by chanting Vedic hymns and offering prasadam. The inhabitants of Vrndavan assembled together, decorated their cows, and gave them grass. Keeping the cows in front, they began to circumambulate Govardhana Hill. The gopis also dressed themselves very luxuriantly and sat in bull-driven carts, chanting the glories of Krishna's pastimes. Assembled there to act as priests for Govardhana Pooja, the Brahmanas offered their blessings to the cowherd men and their wives, the gopis. When everything was complete, Krishna assumed a great transcendental form and declared to the inhabitants of Vrndavan that he was himself Govardhana Hill, in order to convince the devotees that Govardhana Hill and Krishna himself are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all the food offered there. The identity of Krishna and Govardhana Hill is still honored, and great devotees take rocks from Govardhana Hill and worship them exactly as they worship the deity of Krishna in the temples. Devotees therefore collect small rocks or pebbles from Govardhana Hill and worship them at home, because this worship is as good as deity worship. The form of Krishna who began to eat the offerings was separately constituted, and Krishna himself, along with the other inhabitants of Vrndavan, began to offer obeisances to the deity as well as Govardhana Hill. In offering obeisances to the huge form of Krishna himself and Govardhana Hill, Krishna declared, "Just see how Govardhana Hill has assumed this huge form and is favoring us by accepting all the offerings." Krishna declared at that meeting, "One who neglects the worship of Govardhana Pooja, as I am personally conducting it, will not be happy. There are many snakes on Govardhana Hill, and persons neglecting the prescribed duties of Govardhana Pooja will be bitten by these snakes and killed. In order to assure the good fortune of the cows and themselves, all people of Vrndavan near Govardhana Hill must worship the hill as prescribed by me. Thus performing the Govardhana Pooja sacrifice, all inhabitants of Vrndavan followed the instructions of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, and afterwards they returned to their respective homes." Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 24th chapter of Krishna worshipping Govardhana Hill. Chapter 25, continuing on with our story. Devastating rainfall in Vrndavan. When Indra understood that the sacrifice offered by the cowherd men in Vrndavan was stopped by Krishna, he became angry, and he vented his anger upon the inhabitants of Vrndavan, who were headed by Nanda Maharaj, although Indra knew perfectly well that Krishna was personally protecting them. So this is very typical of a person who becomes very puffed up when he's insulted because he's in such a mode of passion. When they're insulted, they become angered very quickly. How dare you do that? How dare you take that away from me, right? As the director of different kinds of clouds, Indra called for the Samvartaka. This cloud is invited when there is need to devastate the whole cosmic manifestation. The Samvartaka was ordered by Indra to go over Vrndavan and inundate the whole area with an extensive flood. Demoniacally, Indra thought himself to be all-powerful Supreme Personality. When demons become very powerful, they defy the Supreme Controller, Personality of Godhead. Indra, though not a demon, was puffed up by his material position, and he wanted to challenge the Supreme Controller. So even a great demigod like Indra is under the influence of Krishna's external energy of Maya Devi. So you see how easily that the mind can be like a puppet, toyed of even just a normal human being, but of a demigod as powerful as Indra. And Indra was very powerful, just like Lord Brahma was powerful, and he became bewildered as well. When they start to think, oh, this money is mine, I am so very powerful, and they start becoming very puffed up, and then Maya comes in and covers their intelligence. They can't see. He thought himself, at least for the time being, as powerful as Krishna.
Indra said, "Just see the impudence of the inhabitants of Vrndavan. They are simply inhabitants of the forest, but being infatuated with their friend Krishna, who is nothing but an ordinary human being, they have dared to defy the demigods." Krishna has declared in the Bhagavad Gita that the worshippers of the demigods are not very intelligent. He has also declared that one has to give up all kinds of worship and simply concentrate on Krishna consciousness. Krishna's invoking the anger of Indra and later on chastising him is a clear indication to his devotee that those who are engaged in Krishna consciousness have no need to worship any demigod, even if it is found that the demigod has become angry. Krishna gives his devotees all protection, and they should completely depend on his mercy. Indra cursed the action of the inhabitants of Vrndavan and said, "By defying the authority of the demigods, the inhabitants of Vrndavan will suffer in material existence. Having neglected the sacrifice of the demigods, they cannot cross over the impediments of the ocean of material miseries." Indra further declared, "These coward men in Vrndavan have neglected my authority on the advice of this talkative boy who is known as Krishna. He is nothing but a child, and by believing this child, they have enraged me." Thus he ordered the Samvartaka to go and destroy the prosperity of Vrndavan. The men of Vrndavan, said Indra, have become too puffed up over their material opulence and their confidence in the presence of their tiny friend Krishna. He's got it backwards, actually. He's like, they become too puffed up and have too much support of their little friend Krishna. They should be worshiping me. I give them all protection. Right? He is simply talkative, childish, and unaware of the complete cosmic situation, although he is thinking himself very advanced in knowledge. So you can remember even Lord Brahma, who is the creator of this universe, very powerful living entity, became bewildered with this idea, thinking, Krishna is not very, I'm the creator of this universe, and I'm Lord Brahma, but then not even realizing that he's one little Lord Brahma and so many Lord Brahmas, infinite number of Lord Brahmas. Because they have taken Krishna so seriously, they must be punished, and so I have ordered the Samvartaka cloud to go there and inundate the place. They should be destroyed with their cows. It is indicated here that the villages, or outside the towns, the inhabitants must depend on the cows for their prosperity. When the cows are destroyed, the people are destitute of all kinds of opulences. That's actually a lot of what's happening now, because we treat cows so poorly. It creates havoc. When King Indra ordered the Samvartaka and companion clouds to go to Vrndavan, the clouds were afraid of the assignment. But King Indra assured them, "You go ahead and I will also go, riding on my elephant, accompanied by great storms, and I shall apply all my strength to punish the inhabitants of Vrndavan." Ordered by King Indra, all the dangerous clouds appeared above Vrndavan and began to pour water incessantly with all their strength and power. There was constant lightning and thunder, blowing of severe wind, and incessant falling of rain. The rainfall seemed to fall like piercing sharp arrows. By pouring water as thick as pillars without cessation, the clouds gradually filled all the lands in Vrndavan with water, and there was no visible distinction between higher and lower land. The situation was very dangerous, especially for the animals. The rainfall was accompanied by great winds, and every living creature in Vrndavan began to tremble from the severe cold. Unable to find any other source of deliverance, they all approached Govinda to take shelter at his lotus feet. I love this story, this idea here, that when the living entity comes to a point of realizing that there is no shelter, there is nothing that you've tried to do in this life, your intelligence, your good looks, your money, your ability to do anything is all fallible soldiers, as Bhaktivedanta would say. It will not protect you from the fear of death. It will not protect you from suffering in this material world. And so the living entity, when they've come to this, when they're unable to find any other source of deliverance. So we have like I have friends in Ukraine, and they're at this situation where they're basically facing death by bombing, but they have taken complete shelter of Krishna. They're devotees of Krishna, and they do what they can. And if Krishna takes them through a bombing or whatever, at least if they are serving their spiritual master and serving Krishna, then they will be pleasing. They will go right to Krishna. So they are under the protection of Krishna one way or another, whether this body is in danger of being destroyed or not. It'll eventually be in danger of being destroyed, whether it gets bombed or not. The cows, especially, being much aggrieved from the heavy rain, bowed down their heads, and taking their calves underneath their bodies, they approached the Supreme Personality to take shelter of his lotus feet. This should be a message for every living entity on this planet, because yes, this situation with the Ukraine is horrible, but we focus all this energy on, oh, how do we save the people of Ukraine, which we should do. We should help them. But this is the story of every living entity in this world, whether they're in a good situation or not. And there are also plenty of other situations in this world where people are suffering, but nobody really takes notice of that. So ultimately, the message is that people should come to take shelter of God, take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and trust him to give us all protection, which he will. There will be nothing else. There is nothing else. Because even if a situation resolves in Ukraine, there will be another situation, and usually it'll be some kind of death somewhere. And so if we're not prepared for that, it'll be a very hellish situation. So it's best to take shelter of Krishna now, whether we're in suffering, whether we're in danger or not in danger. Always take shelter. We should cultivate our attachment to Krishna every day. You are all. Okay, all the time the inhabitants of Vrndavan began to pray to Lord Krishna. Dear Krishna, they prayed, you are all powerful and you are very affectionate to your devotees. Now please protect us from us who have been very much harassed by angry Indra. So we could actually take the angry Indra out and just put very harassed by Maya Devi or very harassed by life in the material world. You are all powerful and you are very affectionate to your devotees. Now please protect us who have been very much harassed by material life, because that is the truth right there. Upon hearing their prayer, Krishna could understand that Indra, being bereft of his sacrificial honor, was pouring down rain that was accompanied by heavy pieces of ice and strong winds. Although this was out of season, Krishna understood that this was a deliberate exhibition of anger by Indra. He therefore concluded, this demigod who thinks himself supreme has shown his great power, but I shall answer him according to my position, and I shall teach him that he is not autonomous in managing universal affairs. I am the supreme lord over all, and I shall thus take away his false prestige, which has risen from his power. The demigods are my devotees, and therefore it is not possible for them to forget my supremacy, but somehow or other he has become puffed up with material power, and thus is now maddened. So this is actually the truth. When you are in a situation where you become puffed up from false prestige or enviousness of God, that is like Maya Devi puts the veil in front of your face. And it's said that no devotee, no one in their sane mind would actually be in this situation. That's what's said here. The person was maddened. He's kind of nuts. He's insane, thinking that he's all powerful and all. And this happens actually quite a bit. Whether it's Vladimir Putin or any other leader or crazy dictator or, just a person who's a CEO, who's a bully, anybody who thinks that their money, their power, their karma, that the karmic reaction that they've gotten to be in a certain position is going to last them. It's going to protect them from death or protect them from their karmic reaction. That's pure insanity. It's just not true. And it's beneficial. And there's a lot of stories here in the Srimad Bhagavatam about people who've come to understand their enviousness of and how they're really working against themselves by being in this position. So it's a lesson for all of us to remember our false ego, the ahankara, our false identification with whatever we have. This body is given to this body, or whatever we have, and is being mine, as being, I'm the owner and controller, I am the enjoyer. This kind of attitude, it ultimately will bring great suffering to the living entity. So the real intelligence is to understand that you don't own anything. You don't even own your own body. You don't own yourself. Everything that is in your possession is by the mercy of Krishna, that could be used and utilized in his service, which is a real intelligence. But trying to hoard it and trying to be envious of the Supreme Lord keeps us in this material world, suffering life after life, birth after birth. I shall act in such a way to relieve him of this false prestige. So Krishna sees this as like, just like the story of Nalakavara and Manigriva. Narada thought, I have to relieve them of this insanity, of this drunken state, and this illusion that they're in, that they're the enjoyer. I have to relieve them because it's a burden. It's actually causing them pain. It's sort of like taking the thorn out of the foot. And it's often said that, that's what the spiritual master also does. He takes these little barnacles off, just like a turtle has sometimes barnacles, he has to scrape them off by chastising the devotee. And the devotee's like, oh, you're hurting me. But actually what he's doing is he's clearing off this covering. And this is a very similar thing. He's relieving him of this false prestige, that a devotee has no prestige. In other words, that's what it says in Lord Chaitanya's prayer. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others without expecting respect in return. This is how a devotee should be, lower than the grass in the street. Very humble, not puffed up. I shall give protection to my pure devotees in Vrndavan, who are at present completely at my mercy and whom I have taken completely under my protection. I will save them by my mystic power. So the devotee, just like the people in Vrndavan, they have complete surrender and faith. All the stories of the Srimad Bhagavatam of devotees, whether it's Prahlad Maharaj or any other devotee, they have complete surrender to the Lord. They have complete faith. And with this attitude, Krishna has promised that he will give his devotees all protection if they just surrender unto him. Thinking in this way, Lord Krishna immediately picked up Govardhana Hill with one hand, exactly as a child picks up a mushroom from the ground. Thus he exhibited his transcendental pastimes of lifting Govardhana Hill. Lord Krishna then began to address his devotees, my dear brothers, my dear father, my dear inhabitants of Vrndavan, you can now safely enter under the umbrella of Govardhana Hill, which I have just lifted. Do not be afraid of this hill and think that it will fall from my hand. You have been too much afflicted from the heavy rain and strong wind. Therefore I have lifted this hill, which will protect you exactly like a huge umbrella. I think this is a proper arrangement to relieve you from your immediate distress. Be happy along with your animals underneath this great umbrella. Be assured by Lord Krishna, all the inhabitants of Vrndavan entered beneath the great hill and appeared to be safe, along with their property and animals. So, let's see how much, okay, I got a little bit of time. I'm going to read the rest of this chapter. The inhabitants of Vrndavan and their animals remained there for 1 week without being disturbed by hunger, thirst, or any other discomforts. They were simply astonished to see how Krishna was holding up the mountain with the little finger of his left hand. Seeing the extraordinary mystic power of Krishna, Indra, the king of heaven, was thunderstruck. I love that. I always love that line because it's kind of like a play on words. He's like, got hit by his own thunder. He's like, whoop. He's got the lightning bolt, but he gets hit. The thunder. He's thunderstruck and baffled in his determination. he immediately called for all the clouds and asked them to desist. He's like, I think I made a mistake. When the sky became completely cleared of all clouds, there was a sunrise again, and the strong winds stopped. I love this. It's just wonderful, because even when a devotee takes shelter under the Govardhana Hill, shelter of Krishna, all the storm stops and the sunshine comes out again. It's very wonderful. At the time, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known now as the lifter of Govardhana Hill, said, "My dear cowherd men, now you can leave and take your wives, children, cows, and valuables, because everything is ended. The inundation has gone down, along with the swelling waters of the river." All the men loaded their valuables on carts and slowly left with their cows and other paraphernalia. After they had cleared out everything, Lord Krishna very slowly replaced Govardhana Hill exactly in the same position as it had been before. So this is always a wonderful, Bhaktivedanta, and my spiritual master would always said that when a person comes out and claims that they're God, or some so-called guru, or somebody says they're an incarnation of God, ask them to lift Govardhana Hill. Ask them to pick up a hill with their finger and just put it down right in its place. They can't do it because they're just full of nonsense. It wasn't really easy. I mean, Krishna couldn't even have to lift up Govardhana Hill. He could have just done it without even being there, but he likes to do these things the way he wants to do it. When everything was done, all the inhabitants of Vrndavan approached Krishna and embraced him with great ecstasy. The gopis, being naturally very affectionate to Krishna, began to offer him curd mixed with their tears, and they poured incessant blessings upon him. Mother Yashoda, Mother Rohini, Nanda, and Balaram, who is the strongest of the strong, embraced Krishna one after another, and from spontaneous feelings of affection, blessed him over and over again. In the heavens, different demigods from different planetary systems, such as Siddhaloka, Gandharva-loka, and Charana-loka, also began to show their complete satisfaction. They poured showers of flowers on the surface of the earth and sounded different conch shells. There was beating of drums, and being inspired by godly feelings, residents of Gandharva-loka began to play on their tampuras to please the Lord. After this incident, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, surrounded by his dear friends and animals, returned to his home. As usual, the gopis began to chant the glorious pastimes of Lord Krishna with great feeling, for they were chanting from the heart. Ooh, love that line. When you're chanting from the heart, it's just wonderful. So that's what we're going to do right now. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 25th chapter of Krishna, devastating rainfall in Vrndavan. So, such a beautiful story. It's something, like I've always said with the Krishna book stories, you should read them all the time, reflect on them, contemplate on them. But this is such a special story, and the meanings are really, really profound and deep, that we can contemplate on them. This idea of taking complete shelter of the Lord in every situation. So I hope that we all take shelter of Govardhana Hill, whether we're in the bombardment of Ukraine or whether we're in Russia or in America or anywhere. We all take shelter underneath Govardhana Hill, and we can feel the safety and security of the Supreme Lord. So let's chant. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Okay, thank you very much. See you next time. Aloha.